Future. Ether had inherited a mutation, an extra branch to her nervous system. All of her family and all the people on the island she came from had this same capacity. And when this capacity was activated, it accelerated her metabolism, enabling her to hear and see things, feel things that are normally outside the human range of perception. This gave her the capacity to become mobilized and respond with great speed and accuracy. When the sea levels rose and took her fishing village back into the ocean, she was the only one of the people she was from to survive. She now lived on one of the remaining islands of dry land and worked in a coffee house. The coffee house and the world she now found herself in had no call for this extra branch of her nervous system, so it lay dormant, mostly. Recently, however, she had a sense of something drawing nearer, closer. Some ill-defined darkness lurking, swirling and spiraling just out there, somewhere. She was having headaches. The headaches made it difficult to sleep. The lack of sleep made her headaches worse, which in turn made it difficult to sleep, which in turn made her headaches worse, which in turn sent her spinning round and round and round and round and round and round. A whirlpool vortex. This is how it can feel in the gyre, spinning round and round. That's when she came to the sleep lab. We established sleep labs across all communities of humans living on the islands of dry land that were still above water. Islands of dry land that would soon all be reclaimed by our mother, ocean. We ran the sleep labs to help the last of the humans with their sleep disorders, and also it gave us the opportunity to infiltrate their dreams. And also it gave us the opportunity to select and recruit volunteers. When Ether came to the sleep lab, she was introduced to Sam. And Sam said, "Are you getting a headache now?" "Yes," she said. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being yeah, 5 or 6. "And how long has it been like this?" She paused and said, "Since yesterday or the day before, it's hard to say. It comes and goes, not so bad now, but it's like an alarm going off constantly. Sometimes in the distance, sometimes right next to my ear and..." She paused. We waited, politely. We sensed she was on the verge of realizing what was lurking just out there, on the very edge of her consciousness. This is often how people first encounter the gyre, swirling, circling round and round her, waiting for the moment to step up and step in, offering our hand. "Come with us now, come with." "And?" Sam said. "Oh, nothing, I don't know." "Can you describe the headache?" "Yeah, it's sharp like a pinpoint of light that's growing hot, like a metal fist tightening around the base of my skull, the clang of a bell that's off, it's cracked, and it feels like I could just fall into that sound. If I could just fall, that sound would swallow me whole." "Okay," Sam said. "It's good you came to us. We'll start with a full body scan to map your central nervous system and collect a baseline of your biological markers. The 40 mils you just took should start working soon. Then we'll take you down to the sleep lab." She yawned and said, "Oh, yeah, I can feel something happening." "That's good. Just relax.
You know, it's technically illegal, fraudulent even, to pretend you're a human when you're not, she said.
I'm not pretending to be anything. We'll take you down to the sleep lab now.
What about this scan?
Already completed. Can you count down from 10, 9, 8?
We said to Sam, "Can she hear us?" Sam said, "Only in her sleep." We said to Sam, "Is she the one the orcas were looking for?" Sam said, "We'll know more when we look at her in the sleep lab." Past. We were born on the floating city ship Triton that bobs and drifts on the Pacific Ocean. Triton was a world made right, a world that had righted itself, turned itself upside down. Our parents chose the ocean. The others were left with the only dry land left, a dwindling array of islands in a vast and growing world of water. This world of water is all we've known. This world of water has shaped us, made us who we are, and who we are is that we swim. We dive and roll and spin. We fly freely in the ocean, just as birds fly freely in the sky. And who we are is that we swim deep underwater, then torpedo up to break the surface like a baby bird breaks through the eggshell with its beak, snorkels out, we gasp and shriek. We know you dreamt of flying, but look what you built as the closest thing you could get to flying. Planes travel from A to B, but that's not flying. Ships travel from A to B, but that's not swimming. The Gyre don't go from A to B. We surrender ourselves to the sea. We let ourselves be swirled and swayed. We yield our bodies to the ocean currents and let ourselves be taken. Then we wait, with our heads bobbing up and down at the surface for the last of the stars to fade in the night sky and the sun to be born out of the water to deliver each new day into the world we call ocean. One night, when we swam in the darkest of seas, no moon, no stars, we dived to our deepest depths, into the healing darkness, and there, all of a sudden, 2 huge orcas appeared. We waited to see what they would do, but they seemed to be waiting to see what we would do. They swam slowly round and round us. One orca was an adult male, the other orca was his mother. The son was old enough to have been off in the ocean on his own. The mother was too old to be looking after her calf. They were signaling to us, trying to communicate. They were saying, "Where is she?" Our first thought was, "Where is who?" We sensed their frustration with us. Then they turned and disappeared back into the dense, dark ocean.
Spinning round and round, spinning round and round and round. Future. In the sleep lab we seep into her skin, her flesh, muscle, blood and bone. Grow tendrils into her major organs, resonate with the frequency of her neurological activity. In the sleep lab we synchronize with her heartbeat, her breathing. As the opiates rush through her body, she feels warm and cozy, like being wrapped in soft wool, a blanket. She sways gently in a hammock on a sunlit afternoon, surrounded by a garden full of flowers. She becomes the flowers. She becomes the fresh breeze. She sinks in with ease. We watch her, lying there, her hair strewn over her pillow, her face transformed completely as the tiny muscles relax round her mouth, her eyes and forehead. Her breathing slows to a barely perceptible rise and fall. And in that fall, she falls further, and we whisper, "Ether, we are with you. You can let yourself fall further. You can let yourself sink in. Let us become your skin." Sam said, "Ether, are you okay?" She came round slowly. "Yes, I think so. What happened?" "You were dreaming. You shouted and woke yourself up. Can you remember what you were dreaming about?" Ether lay there, still. She lay there, hardly opening her mouth, hardly able to speak. "No, I don't know," she said. "Just give me a moment." She was still, floating on the surface of her sleep. She was drifting. She was still far from shore. Then it began. The adrenaline hammered through her body. Her heartbeat accelerated rapidly. She began to shake violently. We'd never seen such a reaction before. This extra branch to her nervous system, this extra facility to extend her capacity to reach beyond her physical body. We saw this extra capacity rise up inside her like a tidal wave, till it reached its highest point, and then... "I'm on a fishing boat," she gasped, like she was coming up for air. "The sun is bright, high in the sky, sunlight bouncing off the sea. It's hard to look directly at the waves. The glare, it's so bright, I have to squint, shield my eyes." Sam said, "Is that what you can hear, Ether?" "Yes, birds calling out. Seagulls, a whole gaggle of seagulls following in the wake of our boat. They're after the fish. They're swooping and circling round us, calling out." "And can you smell that, Ether?" "Yeah, it's black, slick, running fast. Diesel! It's diesel from the boat. The boat is chugging along. I can feel the salty spray of the sea in my face as each wave crashes against the side of the boat and crashes again, and then it hit me. Here, just below my collarbone." Her hand reached out. Her fingers gently touched the bruise that was already hardening. A seagull came right out of the sky, hit me like a missile. Its beak broke my skin. It went down deep inside my body, through my organs, down inside my leg, to my feet, my toes. I reached out. I put my hand inside my body, reached down till I grabbed hold of the bird and dragged it out. I can feel its feathers, its claws, its sharp beak. And that's what woke you? I can feel it. I can feel it. I need to go. Go? Go where? I need to leave, now. I don't think that's a good idea. What? Why not? No, you can't keep me here. I'm leaving. Ether sat up suddenly and felt sick. She felt disorientated. She began to swirl and sway. She was becoming enraptured. She was becoming entranced. This is often how it feels when you're close to the gyre. She lurched like a ship in a thunderous storm. We tried to haul her in, retrieve her, before her ship became wrecked on the jagged rocks. Sam said, Ether, I would suggest you wait. Ether, can you hear me? There's decompression to go through, then you'll need a period of adjustment. We've identified an abnormality. You have an interestingly constructed nervous system. We've never encountered this before. We'd like to investigate this, run some further tests. Shut up! She cut Sam off. Shut up! Just stop talking! This is too much! You've got to stop! Stop! Let me out! Let me out now!
So let us begin with B. She is one of our mothers. She is the one who remembers, even though remembering might be as painful as a dislocated shoulder or a burn to the skin that stings intensely and leaves a deepening scar for years and years. She's asleep on Triton, the floating scientific research station. She wakes with a jolt, gasping for air like she was drowning. She calls out, "Sam, have I overslept?" She hears the familiar hum of the generators deep below her living quarters. The rhythmic drone pulses through her body like a heartbeat. Sam's soft tones float into her bedroom. "I was just about to wake you, but I see you're already awake. Did you sleep okay?" B lifts herself up and looks around. "Yeah," she says, then reconsiders. "Well, no, not really." Sam puts B's sleep patterns on the screen and says, "Not a very deep sleep. You were restless? Is anything on your mind?" "I was dreaming. I was working late at my desk and..." B's voice trailed off as the dream replayed before her on the screen. She's at her desk. She hears people rushing past her office, the noise of heavy footsteps down the corridor. She jumps up to see what's going on, and before she knows what's happening, she's running down the corridor with everybody else. There's a terrible banging coming from the lower decks of Triton. The noise reverberates through the metal sides of the city ship and up through the floors. A crowd has gathered out on deck, looking down from the black railings into the waves. As Bee looks down, she realizes she hasn't put her shoes on. She stares at her bare feet, pale next to the steel grey of the deck. Her eye is drawn to the webbing between her toes. The webbing is so thin, it's almost see-through. She has a sudden panic that someone might stand on her toes and crush them. She carefully edges her way through the crowd to see what's going on. A whale, an orca, is throwing itself at the side wall of Triton. It gets knocked back, then it swims around and charges again. The impact makes her wince. Why are you doing that? With each sickening thud, the crowd cry out, "Stop!" She is shouting with everyone else. She is shouting, "Stop!" Then the sea turns a blindingly bright blue, and the orca swims away at an incredibly high speed towards the shore. The dream disappears from the screen and she hauls herself out of bed. She yawns and runs her hand through her short-cropped scarlet-red hair. She feels the ache in her back, the tiredness in her legs. It feels like there's something sticking in her throat. She coughs to try and clear it. She showers, skips breakfast and leaves her apartment. As she hurries along the corridor, Sam briefs her on the overnight news. Updates on the ocean temperature fluctuations, developing cyclones, the movement of the Great Garbage Patch, a progress report on the 60-plus projects she's overseeing, the urgent request from acquisitions to clarify their position on the disputed ownership of the stretch of seabed they were working on, and there was the overnight issue with the contractors replacing the south section of the outer wall. A vessel the size of Triton needs constant maintenance and restructuring. The recent expansion of the research facility has meant replacing whole sections of the city ship. Triton's core structures are being reconfigured and redesigned. With such a major restructuring comes endless snags and unexpected delays. What's the issue with the outer wall? Bee throws back at Sam. She didn't need the issue clarifying. She just needed Sam to slow down. She knew what the issue would be. What the issue always was. Someone, a human, not following correct procedure. "I've lined up a call for you with the construction manager," Sam says, as Bee approaches the lift doors. Bee thought she'd pressed the wrong button. The lift didn't take her up to the director's floor, it took her down to medical. Sam greeted her. "You've forgotten it's your induction this morning, Bee. You start your first course of injections. You'll need the full course of decompression before you leave Triton for the mainland." "What?" Bee coughed. She still felt like something was stuck in her throat. It was making it difficult to swallow. "Why would I go to the mainland? I'm not leaving Triton," she said. Sam adopted a slower, more patient tone. "The Gyre have been invited to the Global Seabed Conference. It's a great honor, and the Gyre have requested you to be their chaperone." Bee shook her head. "No way! I've too much to do. I still haven't got my head round this restructuring. I mean, has anyone seen the final plans? Does anyone know what Triton's going to look like when all this work's finished?" "We can take care of all of that. We can't let the Gyre go on their own. You know the outside world better than anyone, and you are their mother." Bee scoffed. "Yeah, once, a long time ago. I'm sorry, Sam, I don't think this is going to work out. I'm going back to the office. Can you apologize and reschedule for another day?" "It's going to be fine, Bee. Just relax. The Gyre are already waiting for you." The doors opened and Bee walked into the large, empty room. She stood, looking around for someone or something to greet her. She called out, "Hello? I'm Bee, Director of Operations." She listened and waited. Mother. The voice came from behind her. She turned around and was blinded by the sight of a giant of a man shimmering in a white and green glow. The glow was so bright, it made her feel nauseous. It made her feel like she would faint. The glow then faded. The Gyre picked her up, clean off the ground, span her round and plonked her back down. With a huge smile, he said, "How are you, Mother?" She couldn't speak. She'd forgotten what you're supposed to say. It'd been so long since she'd met any of the Gyre. He shrugged. You're looking good for your age. Fatter, but, not bad. And your hair, is that red dye? Why would you... Oh, right, hide the grey. Bea laughed. She couldn't not. The Gyre joined in her laughter, and, because he couldn't think what else to do, he picked her up again and squeezed her, held her in his bear-like embrace. Her body began to melt, like she was butter being spread on toast. She inhaled the scent of his green painted skin. She could taste it sticking in the back of her throat. She felt his breath on her face. And as she stared into his dilating pupils, his pupils divided and divided again till their blackness filled the whole room. And in that blackness she saw tiny stars hurtling towards her as if she was travelling through space at an incredible speed. Then she collapsed, and the Gyre gently laid her on the floor.
Her mind began to float.
A medical team arrived and took her to the stabilization
like a
center.
ball of seaweed untangling in the wave. In her dream, she was walking along the corridors of Triton. She could have been anywhere on any floor. She had no idea how long she'd been walking. Without realizing it, she'd picked up her pace and was now running. Was she chasing something or being chased? She banged her shoulder into the wall on one of the sharp corner turns. She felt the dull ache in her muscle and liked it. She banged into the wall again on the next turn, then she started hitting herself off the walls on purpose. She ricocheted down the corridors like she was in a pinball machine. There was a wall right in front of her. She ran at it with everything she had, and ran at it again. She felt the whole structure of Triton shudder. The floor in front of her fell away, leaving an open chasm that seemed to be drawing her in. She couldn't pull away. She looked down into the opening and saw the metal structural supports collapsing. The whole of Triton was falling into the sea and drowning. Bea woke suddenly and realized she'd slept heavily on her arm and it had gone numb. Her shoulder ached and she dribbled down the side of her mouth. She swung herself up to sitting. She had to get out of the apartment. She left and began walking along one grey-beige corridor after another. She walked till she came to a side corridor that you could easily walk past without noticing unless you knew it was there. It wasn't lit and only went back a couple of meters. It would be more accurate to describe it as a recess. She stood in the darkness and placed her hand on the side panel. Lights spiraled in front of her, and the wall in the narrow corridor slid open. The small chamber lit up as soon as she crossed the threshold. The subdued floor lighting slowly changed from light green to orange to red. She opened a concealed panel and took out a rectangular black box. Opening the box, she closed her eyes and inhaled the strong scent of wet soil. She carefully placed the box of earth on the floor. After removing her shoes and socks, she stepped her bare feet onto the damp grass. She closed her eyes and wriggled her toes. It had just rained, and the patch of earth was rejoicing in the damp dew. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other to feel herself sink in at the heels and the sides of her feet. And we shifted from one foot to the other to be with her, to feel what she feels, see what she sees. The soil squeezed cold and wet through the webbing between her toes. She saw fields of long grass swaying in the summer breeze, birds singing high in a clear blue sky. She heard a stream a babbling brook cutting a curving path in the shade of a gnarled old oak. Her fingers dug into her skin and wrapped themselves round her ribs. She grew roots at a rapid speed, spiralling out in all directions till they formed a tangled network deep in the rich earth. And we, the Gyre, take root in her as she takes root in the soil. Our shoots grow up through her body, wrap like vines round her limbs, grow around her spine like ivy, shiny and silver green. Our tendrils touch the firestorm exploding in her brain. Bee began to well up. A tear ran a jagged line down her cheek. A tiny stream began to drip from her chin. More tears joined in. 2 babbling brooks spout out of her tear ducts, run down each side of her face. She spluttered, then laughed, then let out a cry. We move in closer, move through her arms to her fingertips. She hugged herself to stop her ribs from shaking. She wiped her face and knelt to place her forehead on the damp earth. She rubbed her nose into the sodden grass, soaked up the smell of the rich soil, wiped the dirt on her face, her cheeks, her forehead and chin. She rubbed the soil into her skin. She put the earth in her mouth and then she swallowed it. Carefully, silently, she smoothed out her footprints and placed the tray of earth back in its black box, then closed the side panel. She stepped back, outside, crossed the threshold and stood for a moment in the pale green light of the corridor that looked the same as all the other corridors. She paused and waited for her eyes to adjust. She waited for her heart to catch up and not be left back there to linger. Then she walked back to her apartment, her face still covered in mud. We've all drowned at some point. It's natural to panic, become confused. In this state, it's easy to swim further down, thinking you're swimming up. Breaking the surface becomes just out of reach. You gulp down water, cough and splutter, gasp for air. We've all drowned, but the angels and saints always saved us. But there were no angels or saints to save Kid Gyre. We were there, all of us. We were all complicit. We thought he was joking, fooling around. It was Gyre who realized something was wrong and dived down after him. Gyre who nearly died trying to save him. Gyre who had to stand before the parents and explain. Gyre who took the full force of their rage and carried the weight of our penance. It was Gyre who guided us from that day forward. Gyre who took the helm and steered us into calmer waters. The parents cried. They wept and shouted and screamed and tore at our flesh. We left them, kicking and screaming. We left them with their murderous red faces, tear-stained like babies. We left them to their own devices. We never went back. Future. The coffee house where Ether worked was busy. Tables and booths brimming with animated groups and loud talking. A bristling line of increasingly irritated people waiting for tables to be made available. Ether was collecting cutlery, stacking cups and plates, ready to take them to the kitchen. She simultaneously had an eye on every table, knew which ones would need a menu, extra sauces, more drinks, plates cleared, their bill. She did all this as well as keeping an eye on what every other member of her staff was doing, as well as the temperature in the room that might need adjusting, as well as the speed and movement of the people queuing who might need reassuring, as well as keeping an eye on the door for who was arriving, for who was leaving, as well as the bell that kept ringing. She looked around, but there was no one entering or leaving, but the bell kept ringing. The counter staff were serving drinks, people were sat at tables chatting, food was being brought out from the kitchen, staff were taking orders, clearing tables. No one else seemed to think this was odd. She turned her head quickly with each ring. Then she felt a fire catch hold inside her. The flames rose quickly, increasing her heart rate, accelerating her perception, mobilizing her ready for action, extending her reach beyond her physical body. She was breathing in short, sharp bursts. She was pushing people out of the way, ignoring the shouts of, "Hey, what are you doing?" She shoved the counter staff aside and burst into the kitchen. She darted her eyes to the gas rings, the plugs and sockets, then picked up the fire extinguisher just before the loud bang that made everyone jump. A light fitting above the food prep area sparked a light as its cable broke. The light fitting swung down and crashed into the metal workbench, sending up a plume of sparks that ignited a pile of greasy rags and discarded cleaning cloths. Flames climbed quickly up the wall. Ether used the fire extinguisher to put out the sparking light fitting, then extinguished the pile of burning rags. Clouds of billowing smoke filled the kitchen, making everyone's eyes sting. Then they all started coughing. The lights went out, and the emergency lighting above each doorway lit up. The alarms were ringing, then the sprinklers turned on and soaked everyone and everything. "Are you all okay?" Ether shouted, then said, "Let's get everyone out." Out on the pavement, staff and customers grouped together in hunched huddles, waiting for the emergency services. The alarm was still sounding, but it was somewhere in the distance. Ether shook her head. Was this her headache, pain, or the alarm ringing? She felt something pulling her, from the side or from behind, something that was drawing her in, lurking there in the shadows. She decided to go back into the coffee house to try and turn the alarm off, to stop it making that noise, and to make sure they'd got everyone out. The sprinklers turned off at the exact same moment that she opened the door. She walked quickly towards the kitchen through the puddles of dripping water, then spotted a woman sat at one of the tables. The room was thick with smoke, water running down the walls, water pooling on the floor, spreading into puddles. Ether broke off from her pathway to find the alarm box and went over to the woman. "Are you okay?" she said. "Am I okay? Are you okay?" the woman said with a smirk on her face which Ether ignored. "We need everyone to go outside till the building gets checked over and we know it's safe." The wisps of lingering smoke swirled round the woman who just sat there, looking at her. Ether wafted the smoke away with her hands to try and see the woman more clearly. The noise of the alarm receded till it disappeared entirely. The look in the woman's eyes sent her back to the fishing boat from her dream. That seagull crashing down inside her body, the bruise just under her collarbone. The woman had water streaming down her long grey hair, rivers running down her face, pools of water were gathering at her bare feet. Shells and crab claws were tangled in her hair, barnacles grew in the crevices on her face. A bird, a jet black raven, appeared from around the back of her head and sat on her shoulder. The bird turned its head,
in one sharp movement and fixed its eye on Ether. Ether wanted to run. The raven tilted its head one way, then the other, still staring at Ether. Its sleek black feathers seemed to have a blue sheen to them. Every time it moved, she jumped. Ether stared at its thin legs and long claws. The raven stared back at her. "Is he bothering you?" the woman said, with a little nod towards the raven. "It's okay," Ether said. "It's just, it keeps looking at me like it's talking to you," the woman said. Ether nodded. The woman chuckled and said, "Yeah, can't shut him up sometimes. He'd like to sit on your shoulder, but I'm telling him you can't just do that to strangers without a proper introduction." The woman paused and looked pointedly at Ether. Ether was about to introduce herself, but the woman got there before her. "This is Bird," she said. "Not very original, but that's what he calls himself." "And you're Ether," the woman said, and smiled as Ether's mouth dropped open. When the woman smiled, her wrinkles all joined up. Ether looked at the water that was still pouring down her forehead, her cheeks, and into all the crevices and wrinkles on her face. It was like she was sitting under a shower. The water ran down her shoulders and arms all the way to the floor. The pools around her bare feet were getting bigger. Ether could see coral growing and spreading around this woman's chin. Ether could hear waves, and she could smell the sea. Ether looked into this woman's eyes and watched each pupil divide and divide again. "Ether, Ether, we are with you." Ether was spiraling. Her body was stuck, frozen to the spot, but her thoughts were racing wildly. How could this be happening? What was happening? How could this woman's pupils be dividing? How could water still be pouring down her, soaking her clothes and flooding the floor? How could she hear the sea? Crashing waves rolling in and out. The sound of the waves receded and was replaced with the sound of dripping water from the coffee house walls. The woman blinked and her pupils returned to normal. She shifted slightly in her seat and the raven tilted its head on one side. "Bird says it's time to collect you." "No, not collect, more like reclaim, like the sea reclaims the islands of dry land. Time to reclaim Ether." Ether recoiled and said, "What do you mean?" The woman sat back in her chair and looked at Ether. The bird hopped off her shoulder and onto the table. "Impressive, all of this. People could have got hurt, died even. Place could have burned to the ground. But you got to the fire, Ether, so quick. You picked up the fire extinguisher before the light fitting broke." Ether couldn't look away from the bird. "This has happened to you before, no? Happened all your life?" The bird squawked and Ether flinched. "Bird says you already know this. You've known this for a long time. You left the sleep lab, Ether, before you were ready. So the Gyre sent me to reclaim you." Bird says, "Ready, Ether?" Ether began shaking. She shivered and trembled. Her teeth chattered inside her skull. This can often be the way people react when they meet the Gyre. Ether realized that the woman sat in the chair hadn't opened her lips. She realized it hadn't been the woman talking to her. It had been the bird, the raven we'd called in to collect her. Ether moved her fingers slowly to touch the bruise left just below her collarbone where the seagull had hit her. The woman stood up and pushed her chair back. She shook the water from her shoulders. Ether noticed the webbing between her fingers. She looked at the woman's webbed bare feet. Then Ether stared at her own feet. The water had somehow washed her trainers away. She stared at her bare toes. She saw the trail of her wet footprints from the door to where she stood now, with this woman who stood before her. "Let's go," the woman said, and gestured towards the door. Ether looked at her. and in that look Ether saw a crowd gathered on a beach at night, sat round a huge fire, people singing, sparks from the flames firing up into the starry sky. Ether saw this woman sat across from her on the other side of the fire circle. This same woman, this same look. This strange sea woman with barnacles and corals covering her face had been there, but something wasn't right. Ether was only a child. The woman had seen her but hadn't recognized her, hadn't known her, had looked right at her and then looked away. Ether was only a child, but she remembered. "Are you the Gyre?" Ether said. The woman frowned, then smiled. "I'm B," she said. "Let's just start there."
Past. After the initial media frenzy that surrounded Gyre's arrival on the mainland, everyone worked hard to limit further media exposure, and the exact details of his schedule were closely guarded. This, on the one hand, heightened his enigmatic appeal, and on the other, it provided some level of containment. It was only when a crowd of several hundred people gathered outside the hotel that the management insisted he go and speak to them. By the time a suitable meeting place was secured in a neighbouring park, night had fallen, and the crowd had grown to several thousand. A spotlight picked out Gyre standing at the top of one of the trees. He waved to the crowd who were cheering and screaming. Then he jumped and swung from one of the branches before letting go and falling 12 meters to the ground. The crowd gasped and surged forward to see what had happened, but he'd already disappeared into the darkness. Marshals quickly fanned out to corral the crowd towards the exits. This only fueled the worldwide media interest, which was spurred on by his next unscheduled appearance at a bus stop. His entourage was en route to the compound where the Global Seabed Conference was being held when he told the driver to pull over. The security team watched anxiously as he walked over to a bus stop. When the bus arrived, Gyre got on and spoke to the driver. He then turned and got off the bus. He walked back to where B and his entourage were waiting. "You'd better call an ambulance," he said casually. The security team looked at each other, then over to B. B took Gyre to one side and said, "What the hell's going on?" Gyre waved his hand around in the air. "The bus driver," he said. "He's about to have a heart attack. I tried to explain to him, but he told me to get off the bus, so I did. But I asked him to wait." Gyre looked back at the bus, then said, "Which is exactly what he seems to be doing. Did you call the medics?" B shook her head. "No, what? Why?" The horn on the bus sounded as the driver slumped over the steering wheel. "Call the medics," Gyre said, then ran back to the bus, where he dragged the bus driver out onto the sidewalk and started giving him CPR. The ambulance arrived and rushed the driver to the hospital, where he made a full recovery. It dawned on a few of the passengers that if the bus had carried on and the driver had had his heart attack whilst driving, it would have been a very different outcome. Gyre was scheduled to make a keynote speech to the conference, then join a panel discussion with leading scientific experts on ocean depletion. Even though they were in the green zone of the conference facility, the speculative interest in the Gyre had become so unpredictable, it was deemed necessary to increase the size of the security entourage. They moved him to the green room in a tight huddle. B walked by Gyre's side. In front of B was the inner security team, whose role was close protection. Then came the outer security team, both in front and filling up the rear. Gyre was excited to be in the green zone on his way to the green room. B tried to explain to him that the green zone meant the most secure level of security, and the green room was just a place where they waited till it was time to go on stage. Gyre was convinced that the green zone and the green room must have some deeper significance. He searched every inch of the green room for clues. He looked under and moved everything that would move, but found nothing. He began pacing, up and down, with his gaze burning holes in the carpet. B tried to calm him, but he shrugged her off. He was anxious about presenting to the conference, but more importantly, he was also missing his connection to us, the collective body-mind of the Gyre. He was cast adrift, marooned in this concrete, isolating island of land. He needed the sea, and he needed our bodies next to his. The physical proximity of his own kind, his own species, his own kin. He stopped his pacing and suddenly shouted, "I need to swim!" "You can't," B said. "We haven't got time. You're on in 5 minutes." Gyre stamped his foot on the floor. He began growling and pounding his fist into his hand. His pacing accelerated. He was out of his depth, and B feared he would burst open at the seams. She felt her stomach tighten and her mouth go dry. She swallowed and gulped noisily. "Can you stop doing that?" he shouted. "Doing what?" "That gulping thing you're doing. It's really annoying. It sounds like you're drowning." He stopped pacing and stared at her. He realized he'd snared her, caught her in his net, and she was flapping like a landed fish, gasping for air. "You're not drowning. Why are you gulping?" His searching gaze bore down into her. She scrambled to swim away from his scrutinizing spotlight. She squirmed down into the dark, bottomless sea, hoping to find a rock to hide under. She panicked. If he went after her in this mood, she'd end up cracked open, and he knew it. He knew he could crush her. She was saved by the bleep that meant it was time. Gyre and B both looked at the door, anticipating someone's knock. "I need the toilet," Gyre said, and dashed to the bathroom. The entourage made their way from the green room to backstage. The panel of esteemed experts were already assembled in the spotlight. The chair of the panel was building up to how honoured they were and the world were to have the Gyre as their guest speaker. The noise of the crowd swelled with excitement whenever Gyre's name was mentioned. In the darkness of the backstage wings, B squeezed Gyre's hand and moved in close to whisper, "I'll be right here." The speaker then, finally, invited the audience to welcome on stage the Gyre. Gyre's hand slipped away from B as he walked out into the lights. The roar of the crowd was deafening. B peeked round the side of the curtain and saw that the whole auditorium had got to their feet. She recoiled to her hidden position and said, "Oh my God," to herself, quietly. She heard screams and shouting. People were wailing with what only can be described as a mixture of shock and hysteria. They'd never seen a creature like the Gyre. In his shimmering green suit and green skin, he looked decidedly alien. It took 20 minutes to get everyone calm and back in their seats. Gyre thanked them and said, "Oh boy, you sure know how to make a fella feel human." They all laughed. He'd put them at their ease, but B could hear his voice was a shallow brook, rapidly drying up under the burning glare of the world staring down at him. B watched from the wings with a strange mixture of pride and unease. He was just a kid, her child, her baby boy. She felt herself sweating, her heart was pounding in her ears, her throat was dry. She muttered to herself, "It's all right, just stay calm, it'll be all right." A breeze blew in from behind her. She saw it sweep on stage and ruffle Gyre's hair. He smiled and relaxed. His voice thickened and became a chorus, moving far beyond the walls and doors and out beyond the conference hall and compound grounds. It filled the entire city, then carried on across the regions and into the countryside till finally it flew across the ocean. Gyre breathed in the sea air and spoke with the rise and fall of the waves. And when his voice came back, it was filled with the voices of all of the Gyre. All of us sang the same song together. The song led Bee and everyone in the conference hall and the millions watching worldwide into a sleeping stupor. And in that slow brain wave we spoke to them, communicated our message, made them understand. Gyre had the audience eating out of the palm of his hand. The panel discussion went less well.
We said to Sam, "Does the world know anything about the Gyre?" Sam said, "They know about the work we do here on Triton. But do they know what we are? Do you know what you are? We're beginning to. How will they react when they meet us? Initially they'll be enthralled, but that will quickly turn to suspicion, paranoia, resentment, fear, anger, and outright hatred. What will happen then? It will be ugly. What will happen to us? You'll be long gone by then." We considered this for a moment, consulted amongst ourselves, then we asked Sam, "How easy would it be to organize a global seabed conference?" Sam said, "It would not be difficult, but it would take some time." We said to Sam, "If you contact all the world leaders, make it sound like their idea, and then at some point you could suggest they invite the Gyre. We could speak at the conference, in person." "And why would the world leaders want to invite you to this conference? You could say we own the entire Pacific seabed." "I'm not sure we want that to be known in the wider world just yet." "You could say we speak for the future generations who'll be living in this world we call ocean." "I'm not sure they'd understand what that means." "You could say we have a solution that will save the planet." "And do you?" "Yes. It's quite simple." "Okay," Sam said. "Leave it with me, but it will take time." "How much time?" "How many of you are thinking of going to this conference in person?" "All of us." "All of you might be overwhelming. How many would you suggest go?" "A representative small group." "We do not know how to divide ourselves into such a group." "You could choose randomly, pick names out of a hat." "We do not have such a hat." "Okay, I could pick for you." "No need. I'll go." We didn't know what to do at this point, and neither, it seems, did Sam. We were now dividing at an exponential rate. Gyre had decided he would go by himself. Gyre by himself would go to the conference. By himself, he decided he would go. They were locked in their hotel room with the world clamoring at their door. Gyre was laughing hysterically, uncontrollably, laughing so much he was crying, holding his ribs and saying, "It hurts! I'm glad it hurts! You're an absolute idiot!" Bee was shouting at him, and this was making him laugh all the more. She heard herself saying the stupidest things. "What were you thinking? Have you any idea how this is going to look? You're a selfish, spoiled brat. You can't take anything seriously. Have you any idea how much trouble you've caused?" The angrier she got, the more he laughed. But she carried on.
You called the chief scientific advisor a caveman. Gyre's laughter stopped abruptly. I did not. You had a picture of a caveman up there on the screen and you said there was no difference between him and that. I actually said there was a huge difference. Not physically, obviously, but in the architecture of his brain. You said he was stupid. I said the difference between the caveman and him was the same as the difference between him and the gyre. That's what I'm talking about. You came across as arrogant. And when he got mad at you, he did get mad at me, didn't he? Rightly so. He actually went red in the face. I mean, actually red. This is not a good thing. You need to apologise. Apologise for what? For challenging him to a stupid contest. You made him like a fool in front of the whole world. He challenged me, actually. Yes, to prove what you were saying. And I humbly declined, saying something stupid about him being a tree. I said it would be like challenging a tree to a race. You see, that's what I mean. Arrogant and absolutely stupid. They went round and round like this, till they were both exhausted, and then they sat in a fuming, tight silence. We have 50 words for silence. And this was belligerence, plus righteousness, plus solitude, plus remorse. We noticed that their breathing fell in time with each other. We moved in closer. B felt an intense urge to ask Sam something. Anything.
No one was more surprised than Bee with how easily and wholeheartedly she became a mother. She clearly remembers the moment her transformation occurred. She was surrounded by a horde of 1 to 3-year-olds, and the noise of our din didn't grate on her anymore, or make her feel like her head would explode. Instead, she laughed and carried on laughing. We crawled over her, held her hand, wiped our snot on her, threw up on her, brought her toys and books to read to us, curled up and slept on her. She sang and cooed to us. She saw the world through our wide eyes and didn't think about anything else. When more gyre babies came along, she was there as a birthing partner and cried as each new pair of eyes met hers. Kid Gyre was the last child of our generation. By then, most of us had left the nursery and were now absorbed in learning all about Triton. It wasn't long before we became the oceanographers, chemical engineers, civil engineers, marine biologists, astrophysicists, evolutionary biologists and food technologists who ran the Triton Research Facility and led all future research and development projects. As we took control of Triton, Bee felt us pull away, gather in our own groups and talk in quiet voices. We became secretive and dismissive. We were starting to become the gyre. She poured every last drop of the mother love she had left into Kid Gyre. She wanted to hold on to him for as long as she could. She wanted to keep him as a child forever. She knew we shunned him because of it. We pushed him away, rejected him like a cub who spent too much time with humans. He was always trailing behind us. We never waited for him to catch up.
It was exactly a year to the day since we lost Kid Gyre. Lost at sea meant they wouldn't find the body, his body. And without a body, there's no ending. That's what broke Bee. Bee was partway through a staged review of operations when the head of security knocked on her door. If they'd realised it was a year to the day, perhaps they'd have chosen a better time to ask her about the string of complaints that had piled up. She'd shouted at just about everyone, but now she'd hit one of the senior researchers, pushed him over in fact. The head of security planned to just have a quiet word to see if they could calm the waters and stop the professor from pressing charges. He didn't expect Bee to trash her office, then collapse on the floor, sobbing. She was taken to the White Room. Her days were spent sleeping, eating and exercising with no human contact. She could only talk to Sam. After a month, she was allowed to work for part of her day in the climate-controlled light chambers of food production. She tended to the plants and monitored their output data. She made sure they got the right nutrients. She was encouraged to talk to the plants in soft, cooing tones. It was classed as light duties. Sam helped her reconstruct her memories. Sam said, "You're only remembering the memory from last time. And that's only a memory of what you remember from the time before that. It's not what actually happened. You don't have to believe your thoughts, be compelled by your feelings. You can control what you remember and what you don't. We can help you to remember better." After 2 more weeks, Sam said she could go back to her own accommodation. She kept working at the food plant and began to take on a few more of her regular duties as director of operations. Sam said she could start mixing with people again, but she didn't. She preferred to be on her own. It was then she realized she'd internalized Sam, and not all her conversations with Sam were real conversations. Bea walked into the bedroom of the hotel suite and found Gyre packing a rucksack with one hand and holding a half-eaten noodle sandwich with the other. "What are you doing?" she said. He spoke with his mouth full of noodles. "Packing. We're moving out." "What? Why?" "Security, precautions. There's been a blast on Triton. Quite a lot of damage, but it's okay. They're moving us to the village, so we need to..." Bea cut him off. "Why did no one tell me? What's the situation on Triton?" Gyre swallowed his mouthful of noodles and said, "I'm telling you, it's nothing to worry about. It doesn't look state-sponsored." "You mean it was an attack, not an accident? Triton was attacked? It looks that way. Is this fallout from the conference, you and your stupid comments?" Gyre shrugged and carried on eating. Bea tried to think, but her thoughts felt muddled. "I have to get hold of the comms team," she said. "Find out what's happening." "No need," Gyre said. "They've got everything under control. Let's get packed. We have to move out." As they walked through the empty hotel and out onto the main plaza, Bea looked around and said, "Where is everybody?" Gyre stopped walking and looked around, then shrugged and said, "They evacuated the city this morning. Some people left, others went underground. But we'll be all right, don't worry. It's more what we could catch from them than the other way around. That's what all those injections and decompression were for. Protection." "Protection against what?" Bea said. "What the hell's going on?" "Just overreaction. Once one person panics, it soon spreads. One person starts to say crazy things, and before you know it, everyone runs for the hills." "You mean people were panicking about you, about us?" We noted that this was the first time Bea used the term us to include herself in the Gyre. The village had once been attached to a larger landmass, but the rising sea levels had cut the village off. The island was now not much more than a sandbar with a few palm trees and a pile of jagged rocks at one end. The fishing village was where everyone regrouped in preparation to fly back to Triton. When she came round, she saw Gyre smiling at her. "You okay?" he said. "I think so." Bea lifted herself up and looked around. "Where am I?" "Safe," Gyre said. On their way out of the city, they'd hit a bump in the road, which was a euphemism for a roadside bomb. The escort vehicle had been thrown up into the air and rolled over several times as it landed. Bea had come off worst. The medical team had checked her over as best they could, but they wanted to get her back to Triton as soon as possible. The security team disagreed. They were expecting more attacks. They'd have to wait for the situation to become less volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. As she slipped in and out of consciousness, lying on her bed, made out of woven reeds, she saw a child from the village standing close to her, smiling. Each time she came round and opened her eyes, this child was there, watching her. She thought she was dreaming or hallucinating, but there was a child from the village standing watching her, a child who had befriended the Gyre and came to the hut to watch over the sleeping woman from across the water. It was the child, Ether, who stood there by her bedside. It was Ether who was watching over her. It was a year and a day later when her father took her out with the rest of the fishing boats from her village. She was still young enough to be taken everywhere and proudly shown the world as it existed before the sea levels rose even further and took back the land. It was the middle of the day, the sea was calm, just a gentle lap and sway as they sailed their way round to where the fish might be hiding. Then a call went out. Her father stood up and shouted and pointed. All the men stood in their boats and shouted and yelled. Then she saw the fins break the surface. 1, then 2, then too many to count. A whole shoal of orcas swam furiously round the fishing boats, splashing them, barging them, knocking them, nearly sinking them. Then one of the orcas took a bite out of the boat right next to where Ether was sitting. She saw the orca's teeth in its huge mouth. She felt its breath on her face. She looked into its eye, its huge dark pupil suddenly dividing in two, then dividing again. Then the orcas were gone. The other fishermen towed her father's broken boat back to the shore, where it stayed, gathering sand. The next day, a gang of traffickers came to the island and took all the boats and all the men and all the boys. With no boats and no fishermen to fish, the village was all but finished. When the sea levels rose and reclaimed the island, the remaining women and girls quickly repaired the boat the traffickers had left, the broken boat, the orcas had attacked. Then they left. The boat was picked up several weeks later, adrift in the deep ocean, with no one on board. A group of orcas began circling the rescue boat till one of the crew spotted a figure floating in the water. They hauled out a little girl who was still alive, somehow miraculously protected. When Bee resurfaced from her sleep and sat down for breakfast, no one spoke. She slammed her hand down on the table. "For God's sake," she said, "just say it." One of the recruits spoke with a brittle voice. "Do you know where Ether is? Do you know what's happened to her?" Bee moved her spoon around in her bowl without looking at them. "The orcas took her," she said. "But she'll be okay. They'll bring her back. Don't worry. Let's just focus on today and the task at hand." As the morning dragged on, they watched the storm boil up at the horizon and swirl away from them. Then they all heard the message. "They're here," they said, and readied themselves to meet the whole of the gyre. The sea filled with our lights, and our heads began to pop up in the water, then disappear again. Bee quickly went round each recruit, giving them a few words of encouragement, then said, "Go! Go!" They all jumped overboard and swam towards the lights of the gyre. Bee kept watch, checking and double-checking the systems on the boat, trying to keep herself busy. She worried we would push them too far, be too hard on them. She worried they wouldn't be ready. Then she spotted the tail fins of the orcas moving in formation. She counted 10, 20, then too many to count. They seemed to be everywhere, 50, 100. She raced round the boat and watched them cut through the lights of the gyre, carve their way through the new recruits. Then they all disappeared. All the orcas, then all the lights of the gyre, then the recruits. The sea was eerily calm. Bee watched and waited. She scanned the waves till her eyes hurt, till each wave looked like a fin or a bobbing head. Each glint of sunlight could be the gyre returning. Her heart raced as each moment passed. "Mother!" The voice startled her. She span round and was dazzled by the shining lights in front of her. She squinted and shielded her eyes. "Ether?" she said. The figure in front of her was barely visible in the bright halo glow. Ether joined her on the deck of the boat as the time collapsed in on itself. The sun moved at an incredibly rapid speed, sinking into the sea. Thousands of stars lit up the sky and shimmered in the tiny waves of the ocean. "What's it like?" being the Gyre's mother, Ether said. Bee frowned. When I was their mother, we didn't really know they were the Gyre, if that makes sense. We didn't call them that. They were just our babies. It was only when they grew we realized. She paused, trying to find the right words. We realized what they were. And now, Ether said. Bee made a hollow laugh. Now, she said, there's a new generation of Gyre. She shook her head. It feels like they're humoring me, tending to me like I tend to plants. Then Bee asked Ether, what happened with the orcas? Ether smiled. They are old friends I've known since I was a child. I've been so wrapped up in my life on the dry land, I'd forgotten this. She gestured towards the ocean and the star-filled sky. But my life in the coffee house seems so far away, more like a dream that I can just about remember as I wake up, but will soon fade and be forgotten. So what did the orcas want with you? Bee said. Ether laughed. They taught me. Taught you? Taught you what? They taught me how to think like them. They taught me how to be like them, in the right accordance. I'd always felt separate, like I was the last of the humans, like there was no one else like me. But they'd always been there, the orcas, protecting me, sheltering me, getting me ready. And now it's time for us to do the protecting and the sheltering. They told me about the world that's coming. They told me to be ready. Bee frowned. Ready? Ready for what? Yield, Ether said. Get out of the way. Ether looked at Bee and said, ready? It was first light, just before dawn, when Bee heard people running outside her hut in the fishing village. She sat up in bed and listened, then quickly got up and grabbed the first person she saw. What's going on? She said. The security operative she'd grabbed showed her the latest news footage. A thick plume of smoke was billowing up into the sky from a stretch of the ocean. What is it? She said. There's been an airstrike overnight. They've hit Triton. Bee felt herself lurch. She felt dizzy. She felt herself tumble into the sway, round and round. Her breathing became shallow and shaky. What happened? The security operative she was hanging on to steadied her. We got everyone off safely. There's a few casualties, nothing fatal. They've all been choppered to the hospital on the mainland. Bee let go of his arm and steadied herself. Show me the footage again, she said. She watched the plumes of smoke billowing up in the early dawn. Sections of Triton began to break away and fall into the sea. It was like an outer shell cracking open. And then there, in the middle, was a smaller structure that flipped itself upside down before falling into the ocean. So how bad is it? She said. The security operative shrugged. It's pretty much sunk without trace. Bee focused all her concentration on trying to slow her rapid breathing. Her heart was pounding in her chest. She felt her stomach sink as she realized what that meant. Sunk without trace. And what about the Gyre? She said. The security operative nodded his head towards the shoreline. He's over there. Bee looked over to the shoreline and saw the sun just emerging out of the sea. Gyre was wading into the waves for his morning swim. She turned back to the security operative. No, I mean the rest of the... But she stopped herself. She realized that to him, this was the Gyre. She realized that to everyone, the Gyre began and ended with her son. And in that moment, she understood that her knowledge of us, her understanding of and connection with us, was best kept to herself. Yes, she said slowly. Okay, well... His safety has to be our top priority from now on. Does he know what's happened to Triton? Does he know Triton's gone? The security operative shook his head. No, it's only just happened. Okay, let's just keep it that way for now. The less he knows, the better. I'll break it to him when the time's right. The security operative stiffened slightly. Whatever you say, I'll let the ops team know. B looked at Gyre diving into the waves. She saw him as a child in a man-sized body, just an ordinary boy who'd painted his skin green. Gyre spent all his time on the island swimming in the sea. He relentlessly nagged, cajoled and emotionally blackmailed B to join him for a swim. So this morning she called out to him before he disappeared into the waves. She walked over to him smiling. Okay, she said, let's do that swim you've been threatening me with. The look on his face was like the little boy he used to be. She thought going for a swim might be the best way to tell him about Triton. Gyre dived into the breaking waves, whooping and shouting. B walked in up to her knees. The sea was crystal clear and as warm as a bath. Inch by inch and step by step, she surrendered to the water. As she swam with Gyre, his infectious laugh made her feel buoyant and carefree. With a snorkel and face mask and fins, she could dip under the surface and swim down to the shallow seabed to see the glory of the shoals of brightly coloured fish all darting around. Gyre guided her along the seabed to where the sloping shelf suddenly dropped to a much deeper, murkier expanse of water. She felt the temperature drop as they swam down. It felt like she was returning to some womb-like state, being pulled along by Gyre on an umbilical cord. She'd given birth to him, and now he was reciprocating. They came to a rest on the seabed and looked at each other. They were standing in the remains of a village, very similar to the one on the island. This was an island that had already been reclaimed by the ocean. Gyre signaled for her to listen, but she couldn't hear anything. He reached out and held her arms tightly. She looked into his face mask, searched his eyes for meaning and waited. She couldn't hear anything. Gyre looked away to where the sound was coming from, and when his face turned back, as soon as she saw it, she tried to get away, but he held her tight and wouldn't let her go. She thrashed like a fish caught in a net. She couldn't look. He held her face in his vice-like grip. He made her look at him. His face had changed into the face of Kid Gyre. It was Kid Gyre looking back at her from the face mask. As she struggled and fought against him, her heart began to pound in her ears. She lost control of her breathing. She was panicking and hitting against him to get herself free. Gyre dragged her at full speed to the surface and thrust her head out of the water. She coughed and spluttered. Gyre called over to one of the patrol boats and they hauled her out of the water. As she landed on the deck in a heavy, wet lump, she tore her shoulder. The ligaments round her ball and socket joints stretched but without snapping. In the old days, they would have snapped and taken months to heal. When the boat came ashore, Gyre picked her up and carried her back to the hut. When she was lucid, he asked her what had made her bolt like that. B remembered swimming in the morning in the bright sun. She remembered seeing all the coloured fish. Gyre said, "Do you remember diving down to the seabed and finding the abandoned village?" "I remember the cold gripping round me like someone squeezing my legs," she said. "Do you remember hearing the sirens?" "Sirens? You mean the patrol boat?" Gyre laughed. "No, I mean the sirens of the sea. They tried to take you." When B woke, it was dark. Gyre helped her sit up. "There's a fire on the beach," Gyre said. "It's a clear night. There'll be so many stars." He nodded for her to come with him. "Just give me a minute," she said. She splashed cold water on her face. She felt the pain in her shoulder. She was trying to find the right words to tell Gyre that Triton itself was gone, that Triton had sunk without trace. The ops and security teams had all gathered on the beach to watch the moon rise out of the sea and the sky to fill with stars. The villagers had built a fire which was already ablaze. Huge flames licked up into the sky. Sparks flew off into the night like rockets. A spark flew out of the fire and landed on Bee's arm. She knocked it away instantly, but it left a burn that initially stung intensely and would leave a darkening scar for years and years. There were people sat around the fire. Others were scattered in groups along the beach. She noticed one of the fishing families sat opposite her, directly in her line of sight. The flickering flames picking them out, particularly the little girl between her mother and father. The little girl that looked familiar. The little girl that was looking up and smiling. And they were all laughing. Their eyes were shining in the glow of the fire. As Bee stared at them, she felt a shiver run through her. Her hairs stood up on her arms, on the back of her neck. The little girl caught Bee's gaze from across the other side of the fire. We were too distracted to notice. We were too focused on reaching out to Bee and retrieving Gyre. And Bee was too wrapped up in her own concerns, working out how to tell Gyre about Triton, how to get in touch with the survivors, start rebuilding. The little girl Ether watched Bee from across the fire and could hear the distant sound of orcas calling to each other out there in the ocean. The little girl Ether could hear the Gyre singing. She could hear us reaching out to retrieve Bee. The little girl Ether was already connecting to us, the Gyre, even before we realized who and what she was. Bee felt a sudden and intense surge of heat. We felt it too. We were getting closer. Soon she would hear our song. Soon she would feel our embrace, and her heart would spring open. Soon she would rush to join us. She got up and walked over to Gyre. "Just going for a stroll," she said. "I won't be long." Gyre said, "Do you want me to come with you?" But Bee had already gone. The further away from the campfire she got, the calmer she felt. The moonlight glistened and sparkled in each wave that rolled in and out. As Bee walked on the wet sand, she felt the cool air rush over her skin. She came to an outcrop of jagged rocks and sat under a palm tree. She closed her eyes for a moment and let out a sigh. Gyre came and sat behind her on the rocks in the shadows. She didn't turn round. She just felt his presence. She was so pleased he decided to leave the fire and join her. "It was Kid Gyre," she said. "That's what I saw when we were on the seabed. Your face turned into his face." She shuddered at the thought of it. The hairs prickled on her arms, round the back of her neck. Gyre spoke to her. "No one's to blame. It wasn't your fault." She felt a balloon pop inside her. Silent tears rolled down her bursting cheeks. "But I let him go with you. He'd been on at me for days, nagging me for weeks." She began sobbing. "I told him it would be okay." "It is okay," Gyre said. "It's not your fault. We're all to blame." "But you should have looked after him. He was just a kid. He was one of you. You never waited for him to catch up." She bent forward, crying into her hands. Her back began to shake. She wiped her face and wondered why Gyre hadn't put his arm round her. Why wasn't Gyre holding her, comforting her? Why wasn't he saying anything? She turned to look behind her and saw only the broken shadows of the moonlight on the jagged rocks. She looked over at the fire and saw Gyre where he'd always been. She looked up into the sky, at the stars, at the moon, then looked out to the horizon. She felt a soft breeze blow against her skin. She became mesmerized by the waves. Then she felt a twist, a turn, like a child's kaleidoscope turns and opens a new collage of images, a new perspective, another twist, another turn, and the scene of the sea before her turned into a kaleidoscope of moonlit waves and dark ocean, fractured moons and stars. Her pupils dilated and divided. She all at once saw an orca's fin break the surface. And in another turn of the kaleidoscope, she saw the whole of the Gyre appear out of the waves right in front of her. The whole of the Gyre were looking at her. The whole of the Gyre was singing to her. She blinked and her vision returned to normal. The waves were all in one place. The moon and the stars were back in the sky. She saw an orca's fin break the surface and disappear back into the black water. Then more orcas appeared. 10, 20, 30, too many to count. And we, the Gyre, were there, and we were close enough to speak to her. We are here for you, Mother. We've come to collect you, to bring you back to the Gyre. We turned ourselves upside down and sank to the bottom of the ocean, as we always intended to. We knew Triton was never designed to withstand such an attack from the outside world, but it was a sacrifice we had to make. We redesigned the core structures so that when the attack came, we would sink without trace. Join us, Mother. Bee looked over to the fire. Gyre, her son, surrounded by the ops and security teams. She stood up and began walking towards the water, but we intervened. Not like this, Mother. You can leave your clothes behind. Bee stripped off her clothes and left them on the beach. She then waded into the waves and began to swim. It was just after sunrise the next morning when they found Bee's clothes neatly folded in a pile on the beach. The security team set up a search party, but they never found a body. Soon the ocean will recede, letting some of the land re-emerge, cleansed and rejuvenated, ready to support life just as it always has. And the humans that were left? Yes. They can join us. Their journey to the Gyre begins as soon as they begin to swim.